So I'm not sure what I was at, what to tell you about in the beginning here, but I can give you kind of an update on what's happening all over the country in opioids. So for my practice, I will tell you that I've never been busier. With the rise of the coronavirus, the opioid epidemic, at least from my perspective, has gone up exponentially. With people staying at home, depressed, and the cocktails between opioids and benzodiazepines, people are ODing at an alarming rate that I see. On the national front with the opioid litigation, we had a trial scheduled in January, and it got continued because of COVID. So that trial now is scheduled to begin a 12-week trial in April in West Virginia. Now, the interesting part about that is that, as all of you see on the news a lot, is that the attorney generals all over the country are trying to settle this case out from under the cities and counties, okay, for political reasons. But Cabell County, this trial will go regardless if the national opioid litigation settles. And if it doesn't settle, the national opioid litigation will settle for an exponentially higher amount of money, because the judge has ordered that this trial be live streamed to the media. So for the first time ever, the country will find out exactly what these distributors did and how they perpetuated this opioid epidemic for a profit, and how much money they made as a result of it. The second trial that's upcoming is in October and November. That's going to be another 12-week trial. And that trial will be against the pharmacies such as Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, and Walmart. And the one thing you'll understand, and it'll hit home here in Pasco County, is this, that the distributors all had a duty. That would be McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, to alert the DEA of what they called suspicious orders. But the pharmacies were also acting as distributors, okay, for their own profit. And in doing so, they had to undertake that same duty. And they had nothing in place to alert anyone of suspicious orders. And so there's evidence in 2010, the Walgreens in Newport Richey distributed 2.3 million pills of Oxycontin into Pasco County, just one pharmacy, okay, without any oversight whatsoever. Now, the thing that this county and every city and county in the state of Florida needs to be aware of right now is House Bill 1053 and its companion filed in the Senate by Danny Burgess. And the significance of that bill is this. Florida has what's called home rule. And home rule is a provision that allows the cities and counties to file lawsuits on their behalf to try to recoup monies that they have outlaid. The Attorney General in this state, Ashley Moody, and her counsel, and they've filed their own lawsuit on the behalf of the state. But so you understand, they've never done one thing in litigation. They've never taken a deposition. They haven't done anything. But they want to file a bill and pass a bill that basically says this: if the AG finds a case that she considers of important government importance, that she can intervene in the city and county cases, dismiss them, and the state, and settle them on behalf of the state and hold all the money. So what that means for all the cities and counties in the state of Florida, if that passes, is this: that the cities and counties are spending their own money fighting this opioid epidemic, and they're fighting a losing battle right now. And they filed lawsuits all over the state of Florida in an effort to recoup the monies that they are expending on a daily basis. And now Ashley Moody and the Republican Senate and House not only want to prevent them from being able to do it, but to take the work that they have done, settle the cases, and then keep all the money and for the state. So that's really what's going on in the forefront right now. I think that fentanyl patches are becoming a norm. I think that if Gus Larakis is on this call, that the federal government really needs to do something about the fentanyl patches. I mean, they're now being prescribed, and I'm seeing overdose cases on a regular basis for people who have fibromyalgia. Okay, there's nothing in the world that would indicate that a drug 100 times stronger than morphine should be prescribed to an individual who has non-specific muscle pain. But that's happening all over the country, and nothing's happening about it, and people are dying every single day. I appreciate you guys giving me the time to talk to you, give you a little update what's going on nationally. I hope that you call your representatives and tell them that they shouldn't vote for House Bill 1053 or the companion in the Senate, that they should give the cities and the counties the right to recoup the money that they've spent on this epidemic and will continue to spend for the next 20 or 30 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Magazine. So before I pass it on to our lovely moderator, Dr. Giannette, my name is Parnia Rogani. I am doing the Epidemic Intelligence Surveillance Fellowship with Florida Department of Health. It focuses mostly on the opioid epidemic in our county. I also co-chair ASAP's RX committee, and we normally have those meetings once a month, the first Tuesday of the month. But in lieu of our monthly meeting, we are holding this informational town hall, which will discuss medication safety along with a discussion with our expert panelists. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Giannette. Dr. Stan Giannette is the Executive Vice President, Chief Academic Officer, and College Provost at Pasco Hernando State College. He was formerly the founding provost of the college's Porter campus at Wiregrass Ranch, the provost of the North Campus, the Dean of Arts and Sciences, and a tenured psychology faculty member. He has also held faculty affiliations at USF College of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry, University of Central Florida College of Medicine, and USF St. Pete College of Business. A clinical psychologist by training, he was recognized by the National Academies of Practice and the Psychology Academy as a distinguished scholar and fellow. He is an accomplished consultant, author, speaker, and a community advocate. Dr. Giannette has served in leadership or governance roles in local, state, and national organizations and has provided consultation or presentations to professionals in almost every industry sector throughout his career. Dr. Giannette, pass it on to you.
Thank you very much, Parnia. I appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here with us this afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this event. It is just abundantly clear that whenever we're contending with any social ills or psychological struggles, the more awareness we have, the more education, the more information is at our fingertips, the greater the likelihood that we will achieve a catalyst for change and a catalyst for growth. So it is our hope today that by being here collectively together, having these candid discussions in this town hall forum, that you'll achieve some morsel of opportunity for growth and an opportunity to know how much resource awareness and support this community has for individuals who are struggling. So with that, we'll pass on the baton back to Parnia Rogani and Captain Tony Roach from the Pasco Sheriff's Office for a medication safety presentation. Parnia?
Thanks again, Dr. Giannette. So today we're going to discuss medication safety. So before I begin, I'm going to give a little explanation on ASAP, Alliance for Substance Addiction Prevention. ASAP is an addiction prevention coalition in Pasco County, which allows for community members and community partners to come together to fight not only the opioid epidemic, but to prevent drug misuse in our community. If you'd like more information, feel free to contact our coordinator, Kelly Rodriguez, at empoweredcommunities.org. So let's first begin with what are opioids. Opioids are a highly addictive medication that is used to relieve pain. They interact with the receptors in the brain's nerve cells and create a pleasurable effect that relieves that pain. They can cause drowsiness, confusion, nausea, and constipation if not taken properly. So some types of opioid, we have heroin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, morphine, fentanyl, and tramadol. This little illustration gives a good visualization of the lethal doses of heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil. So the lethal dose for fentanyl is 2 milligrams. Carfentanil, which is a sedative for large animals such as elephants and horses, is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. So medication safety depends on how medications are stored and disposed in the home. It's important to understand the dangers of not only storing meds properly, as it can affect anyone in the household. So it's important to remember that although this is an opioid misuse town hall, we need to be storing all of the medications at home safely. Medication safety also involves you talking to your doctor about the prescribed medications you take to make sure that it is the right medication for you. So why is medication safety important? Because medications are the most common poison exposure in the United States. So not storing or throwing medications away properly can lead to sickness and even death. Many young children can mistake medications for candy, and nearly 50,000 children end up in the emergency room each year. So what does medication misuse look like? Misuse can consist of taking someone else's medicine, taking more than what is prescribed, and not taking the medication that as prescribed. So skipping doses, doubling down if you skip a dose. So signs of medication misuse are changes in sleep pattern, poor hygiene, change in mood, isolation, weight loss, appearing drowsy, and loss of appetite. So how can you store your medication safely? You can store medications in a location that is too high for children to reach or see. Do not leave medications or vitamins on the kitchen or bathroom counters. Keep the medications in their original bottle so you know what is what. Make sure that you're checking the expiration of the medicine. Talk to your pharmacist if you're not sure how to store your medicine, or use timer caps to make sure that your medications are properly secured. And just some visual examples of how to store medications. So how do I dispose of medications? Although it is not recommended, you can mix medicine with coffee grounds or kitty litter, or a more recommended approach would be to ask your local pharmacy for a drug deactivation kit, usually free of charge. You can also get them at Walgreens, Walmart, CVS. You can also, again, contact our coordinator, Kelly Rodriguez, for ASAP deactivation kits as well. You can drop your medications off at a local drop box or participate in DEA take-back days. And I'm gonna play a quick video.
So Parnia, we can't hear it.
How about now?
No.
Uh-oh.
Pernia, there should be a button that you push on the little dots that says enable computer audio or share computer audio.
Thank you.
Some things in your medicine cabinet are more dangerous than others. When it comes to prescription drugs, opioid pain medicines can be addictive and even deadly. Keeping unused opioid medicines in your home is risky. Half the people who misuse prescription pain medicines get them from a friend or family member. Over 100 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose, and millions are addicted to opioids. But you can be part of the solution to the opioid crisis. Go through your medicine cabinets, drawers, anywhere you keep unused opioid pills, patches, or syrups, and find out how to dispose of them safely. Visit fda.gov/drug disposal for details and remove the risk of opioids in your home.
So for more information, again, you can go on the FDA website. We are also adding information to our website, empoweredcommunities.org. You can also drop your medications off at take-back drop boxes. You can check in on these two websites. We will be emailing out these PowerPoints. The first website gives information on DEA take-back days, or if you go onto the Safe Pharmacy website, you put in your zip code and it'll give you the drop box locations near you. We also have our medication disposal program, which again gives you locations of where you can drop your medications off, and they don't necessarily have to be dropped off on take-back days. Just whenever you feel like you have to get rid of your medications. So now we're going to talk about naloxone. Naloxone or Narcan is a medicine used to reverse an opioid overdose. It binds with the receptors in the brain and it reverses and blocks the effects of the opioids, which can restore breathing when breathing has slowed or stopped as a result of an overdose. And you can administer the Narcan nasally. However, it is very important to remember to call 911 after Narcan is administered. We will cover that in the next slide. So where can you get naloxone? At your local sheriff's office, your local pharmacy, local ASAP outreach programs, which again, you can contact us. And also isafeflorida.com also has information on where you can obtain Narcan. So now I'm going to pass it on to Captain Tony Roach of the Pasco Sheriff's Office Behavioral Health Intervention Team. She will talk with us more about what to do if you see an overdose and laws that protect Good Samaritans who do. Captain Roach.
Thank you, Parnia. Hi, I'm Tony Roach. Work at the Pasco Sheriff's Office with our Behavioral Health Intervention Team. One of our goals is to connect people to substance use services post-overdose. And thankfully, because of this program and the use of naloxone, we've been able to get almost 100 people connected to our substance use resources in the community. Next slide. One of the highlights we would like to talk about today is the Good Samaritan Act in Florida state statutes. There's actually two pieces to it. The first part is under Florida statute 893.21, which is specifically related to a person who is calling for somebody who overdosed, or if somebody themselves are experiencing an overdose. And that Florida state statute basically tells anybody that, as long as they're acting in good faith to seek medical assistance for individuals experiencing a drug-related overdose, cannot be charged, prosecuted or penalized for any drugs that are found in and around the area of the person who is experiencing the overdose. Likewise, the person who is experiencing the overdose can also not be charged for in the same manner as the person who would be calling on their behalf. And that's done to protect people. In the sheriff's office, that's our primary concern as well, is the safety of the person whose health is at risk. That's our primary concern. We're working to connect people to services, and post-overdose, we're attempting to engage those people and providing them with 2 doses of Narcan nasal spray for instances where they're still having difficulty overcoming their addiction. We want to keep them as safe as possible.
Signs of an opioid overdose can look like blue lips or nails, dizziness and confusion. The person can't be woken up. It sounds like they're choking, snoring, or gurgling. It is important to note that if you hear someone snoring, it could be a result of an overdose. Slow, weak, or no breathing, drowsiness, or difficulty staying awake. Again, if you see any of these signs, please call 911. The Good Samaritan Act is there to protect those who call for help, so please do not hesitate. And again, the Good Samaritan laws save lives, so do not be afraid to call 911. All right. Before we move on to the next phase of the town hall, does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to either unmute or write your question in the chat box. All right, so then let's go ahead and move on to our panel discussion. Dr. Giannette, I pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Parnia. And before we move to the panel discussion, again, building upon what Parnia indicated about ASAP, it's so heartening to see that there are agencies and volunteer entities out there that support individuals who are struggling. Many individuals believe that there's absolutely no one out there who truly understands the saga that they're going through, and they feel they're alone. And we know from clinical research, it's overabundance that the more social support one has when they're struggling, the greater the likelihood of recovery and healing. So it's important to note, ASAP is here for you, the Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. They've been a large and successful prevention coalition in Pasco County. They enjoy strong representation from all sectors of the community for almost 1 decade. And they've galvanized the community with significant increases in awareness. After determining that there's not one single agency or not one single group that's chiefly responsible for providing these resources and making an impact and making a change in our community for people who need it. So it's evolved, and we're delighted to see that, and it's meeting the needs of a rapidly, you heard earlier, rapidly growing county crisis, becoming a coordinating body for prevention services and continuing to work on the coalition's mission. Again, please reach out to empoweredcommunities.org. That's empoweredcommunities.org. So again, thank you, Party and Captain Roach. We'll commence right now with our panel discussion. And again, we'll also leave some time for some questions and answers. It might be convenient to just, if you have a thought that comes to mind, feel free, take the liberty to just use the chat feature. And towards the end of the program, Parnia and team will review those and see if we can get to your questions and for the panelists. So our first panelist is Maddie Horn. Maddie is a member of ASAP's youth coalition entitled Stand, Above the Influence. Maddie has been a key member of Stand and received ASAP's Youth Volunteer of the Year award. She's passionate about preventing substance abuse and creating a safer environment for youth in all schools. So Maddie, thank you for your ongoing support and courage, and so early in your professional career, you're an advocate. So welcome to the program today. I have a few questions for you. Tell us what does STAND mean, and what does it mean to you?
So STAND is a group of youth who go around to different schools in the county, and we get the word out saying that, you know, drugs are not cool, no matter like how the media depicts it. And, you know, we just try to make sure that teens always have a place to go so that, you know, if they are struggling with mental health or an issue at home, that drugs is not their, like, it doesn't have to be their option. There's so many other things that you can do. To me, it was a healthy outlook for me. I grew up without a father because he chose drugs over my brother and I. So it was a healthy way for me to, you know, get out my anger. I was really angry at him, and, you know, I didn't really understand why it happened, but with STAND, it helped me understand that, like, hey, this wasn't my fault. It was a choice that he made, and, you know, I can now help other people before they go down the path that he did.
There's nothing more powerful, Maddie, than having that first person experience, right? And impacting other people, because you can truly say, I have been there, I've experienced it, I know what you're going through. The power of empathy is amazing. So yeah. You're in it, right? So you're interacting with a lot of children, a lot of kids in K-12. So are you seeing any trends in the schools, Maddie, relevant to addiction?
I feel like vaping and weed are a very big issue right now. I go to Gulf High School, so I see a lot of times that our bathrooms have been closed because that's where students tend to go when they do it at school. And, you know, when people, you know, I've had friends that I've had to, you know, stop talking to because I've told them, I was like, hey, I don't want to be associated with you if you keep on doing this. You know, it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you. And I've had to stop talking to friends because of it. And, you know, I try to explain to them, like, hey, it's not really cool to do this. Like, you know, you're not only affecting yourself now, but you're affecting yourself years down the road.
Yes, and when they're, as you so eloquently indicated, people just automatically don't just become addicted, right? There's usually some other variable, some other stuff going on in their life that's painful, and oftentimes drugs unwittingly become the medication, and when you're in the throes of that, you can't see tomorrow or several years out. So very good point. Let me ask you, you just saw the presentation that was shared with the group here. What do you perceive as the importance of medication safety to you and your loved ones and your friends?
Well, I live with a 4-year-old, and a lot of times we put the medications up in high cabinets, like the presentation said, and you know, I feel really protective over him. So, you know, I don't want anything to happen to him. So, you know, the proper medication safety, because both my brother and I take prescribed medications. So for Elijah, the little one, it's very important to me that we keep the things up so that he doesn't get hurt and he doesn't get sick and possibly die. I've noticed a lot of the older people in my family have had issues with misuse of prescription drugs, and a lot of times my great aunt Diane, she would abuse the medication that her doctors would give her. She would get a pain medication, and instead of taking the first dose, she would take 2 doses at once. And sometimes she would, you know, take the first dose at the right time, and then instead of taking it 4 hours later, she would take it 2 hours later. And you know, I just don't really want that to happen to my cousins or anybody else in my family. So that's why, you know, I'm so passionate about talking about, you know, you need to put your medications up. You need to make sure that they are out of reach of younger children, and that you follow directions that your doctors give you for your medications.
Thank you for that insight, Maddie. It's very important that you articulate that, because those are just some things that we oftentimes don't think about. So just being ever mindful can go a long way. Maddie, thank you so much. Maddie Horn, for being here today. I'm so proud of you. Thanks for your narrative, your story, your courage. I think you're just going to be an exemplar for many people years to come. You're going a long way. So again, thank you for being here today. Have a good day today. Thank you. Thank you. Maddie Horn, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's move to our next panelist. And I'm honored to introduce my good friend and a true advocate for the cause, Congressman Dustin Larakis. Congressman Larakis is a Republican from Palm Harbor. He represents our Florida 12th Congressional District, and includes all of Pasco and all of the northern parts of Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. He was first elected to Congress, ladies and gentlemen, on November 7th, 2006. He serves on the Energy and the Commerce Committee. He's the ranking member of Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee, and a member of the Health Subcommittee and Communications and Technology Subcommittees. 38 bills he has authored into law since 2015. He was recently designated as the most effective lawmaker in the state of Florida by the Center for Effective Lawmaking at Vanderbilt University, and working in a bipartisan matter, which is critically important. His main priorities include controlling government spending, creating jobs for middle-class America, finding ways for government to operate smaller, smarter, lowering taxes. He's also committed to strengthening Homeland Security, improving education, increasing access to quality health care, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, and he's been just a staunch advocate of our veterans and veterans benefits, ensuring the long-term viability of Social Security and Medicare, and improving emergency preparedness response. Congressman Larakis, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I appreciate your presence very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Stan, and happy Greek independence month.
Indeed. Thank you, sir.
We're both Hellenes, and it's the 200th anniversary of Greek independence. And please tell your mom I said hello.
I shall.
But this is a very important subject, very close to my heart, and I've been focusing on this for several years. And I want to really congratulate ASAP for doing such an outstanding job over the years. Hopefully next year or in a few months, we can be together face to face and talking about these issues. I also want to commend Maddie for doing such a great job. I'm so proud of her. Maddie, I'd love to meet with you personally, and then also possibly have you come and intern in DC with us, because you could add so much. You know, Summer is my deputy chief of staff, and she's on the board of ASAP, but she's been working on these issues. And Maddie, I want to meet with you and Summer when I get down there, when it's safe for you, because I'm telling you, you've done so much good. You've saved lives, and I know you'll continue to do your best and to protect your family, but your community. Pasco County has done an outstanding job over the years. I know it's a difficult thing, and it is an epidemic, and particularly now with the epidemic that we're facing with COVID-19. But Pasco is always there. ASAP is always there for its citizens, and you know, we've got to remove the stigma because this is a real problem for quite a few families. It doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate. So you know, you have rich, middle class, poor families. You know, in America, we're really classless, which is very unique in the world. So in this particular case, it is classless as well. It affects most families, and we have to do everything we possibly can. And the mental health issue is so very important. On the telehealth issue, we sponsored legislation last session, and most of it passed under this omnibus in December, and it had to do with access to telehealth, making sure Medicaid and Medicare covered telehealth, specifically mental health. And I'm really proud that we did that. But there's so much more to do. I know you might have some questions, Stan, and I'm prepared for them.
Yes, thank you very much, Congressman.
Sure.
And Maddie, you heard the Congressman's invitation. Anytime a Congressman invites you to come to the office with a potential opportunity to connect with the federal and be part of that, his office, it's a wonderful opportunity. So thank you for recognizing that, Congressman. A couple questions for you, sir. What are some of the federal efforts that are now in the pipeline meant to support states and also meant to support local governments in tackling the addiction crisis?
Yeah, and I have some notes here, so I'll stick with these notes as much as I can, Stan, because of the time constraints.
Sure.
Sadly, we have seen a huge spike, as you know, in overdose rates throughout the nation in recent years, and it is an epidemic. The strain of the pandemic has also exacerbated throughout the pandemic, and we're going to be, particularly with a mental health crisis, it's not going to go away anytime soon. We've got to do everything we can. Last October marked the second anniversary of the Support Act becoming law. This bipartisan legislation was accomplished by, and actually accompanied $6 billion. So $6 billion in federal aid to help address it. The Support Act offered greater protection for communities by advancing treatment and recovery initiatives, improving prevention programs, and bolstering efforts to fight the importation of illicit synthetic drugs like fentanyl. And we have been focusing on that issue. And the problem is, with the opioids and what have you, people get drugs off the streets as well. And heroin is a big issue, not just in Pasco, but all over the country. Let's see here. I was the primary author of two provisions which passed as part of this package. The first was a bill to implement the basic national standards for the operation of sober living homes, which is so important. I wanted to ensure that those who are seeking treatment do not become the victims of exploitation. My prevention abuse bill was also included. But I want to tell you, we have to have national standards, not only for the sober homes, and particularly down in and it's a big problem down in South Florida with kickbacks, where the residential treatment center assigns an individual to a sober home, and sometimes it's not a legitimate sober home, and of course the treatment center gets a kickback. It's terrible, and my particular bill that passed will prevent that from happening. So we have to have accountability. But even these residential treatment centers, people need to know. They need to know. They need to be rated, because nobody really knows. I mean, you get firsthand, secondhand recommendations for your children, what have you, and you spend thousands and thousands of dollars, and that's another issue. People have to have access, but you want to make sure it's a good treatment center. So I'm going to continue to work on that. So let's see. Additionally, we had, it required the use of a drug management program for high-risk Medicare beneficiaries, and I was the author of that one as well. And that had to do with, in other words, if you're high risk and you're taking these medications, you have to have a lock-in, pharmacy lock-in. And we do have a lot of snowbirds, so you lock in a pharmacy. It could be a chain pharmacy. It could be an independent pharmacy. You lock one up in Florida, lock one up down up north or what have you if you're a snowbird, and then you can track the medication, so we alleviate the pharmacy shopping. And if it's a Walgreens or a CVS, what have you, you can go to any of those Walgreens and CVS. But it's going to take a lot. We can't, just one issue or one piece of legislation is not going to fix it. So we need people like Maddie to spread the word. Additionally, I was a strong proponent of eliminating referral kickbacks for against substance use treatment. The Support Act's passage followed the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, which was signed into law in 2016. So I want to say that this is a bipartisan issue, and everyone is on board. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter. They see They recognize that this is a real crisis, and we're losing our people. It contained approximately $4 billion, this next bill, in funding and modernized many of the mental health programs funded at national level. This large bipartisan package included the COVER Act, which is my bill, and the PROMISE Act. And these bills paved the way for the VA, because I'm a strong supporter of veterans, to cover alternative and complementary treatments rather than just medication for PTSD or TBI, traumatic brain injury. Additionally, my legislation required VA doctors to use national best practices when prescribing opioids. So important. Well, you know, there was a hospital in Wisconsin which was called the Candyland, and the doctor was called Candyman. And what happened was one of our heroes overdosed, but involuntarily. It was one of these cocktails that they gave him, and it brought national attention. And I took the bull by the horns. And now you've got to find alternatives to some of these opioids. And these complementary treatments are very important. And we have some great centers such as the Veterans Alternative in Pasco County for veterans. But this should apply to everyone, not just veterans, alternative treatments, because people are afraid now to take opioids because of the addiction issue. While we still have more work to be done when it comes to ensuring patients struggling with addiction have access. Access is the key to the treatment they need. These two landmark bills were a huge step in the right direction. So that's the issue that I covered there. And I think you might have one more question. Is that correct, Stan?
Yes, sir.
I know I'm running out of time, but I know how important this is. That's why I was on at 3 o'clock, because
Sure.
It's just vital that we tackle this issue in a bipartisan fashion.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. And I know you're working on some other statutes and bills that support those in recovery, because a lot of times, as you know, people who are in recovery oftentimes don't appreciate, can't see that the government might have some important assistance for them. So can you just briefly talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well,
what about even limiting the indiscriminate prescriptions of opioids that we just talked about earlier?
Yeah. Well, again, you know, people need pain medication in some cases, so they have to have it. But the pain medication is not going to cut it anymore. It's a short-term solution, and so that's why I think these alternative therapies are so very important. Again, since doctors are licensed by each state, the legislation to limit opioid prescribing has primarily been done at the state level. Now we're responsible for the funding, and then you supplement it with state funding and local funding. But really the prescribing is done on the state level. So the legislature, the state legislature is responsible for that. But there are two bills that you might find interesting, Stan. First and foremost, I've always been a strong supporter of the Prescribing Drug Monitoring Program. And Jeb Bush, actually, he did an outstanding job, in my opinion. And this was a little controversial, but it was needed in the legislature, and I supported it. The PDMP, which is the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, is an electronic state database that tracks and records controlled substance prescriptions. I supported their creation when I was in the legislature, and I fought for their funding since coming to Congress, and authored legislation that required the VA to link its database with their state's databases, and have been working on interconnectivity between the state lines. Now, the PDMP's Help Patients Act is moving through Congress. I've co-sponsored this. The bill aims to help people suffering from addiction or mental illness locate treatment by linking information on treatment to the state prescription drug monitoring program. The bill creates a pilot program to integrate a substance use disorder and behavioral health treatment locator tool into the PDMP, ensuring those receiving opioid prescriptions have access to critical resources for mental health services and substance abuse. As you know, that sometimes they overlap quite a bit. They overlap the mental health and the substance use. So, and in the second bill, 679 is the Effective Drug Control Strategy Act, and that will be helpful as well. The bill aims to implement a recommendation included in the final report of President Trump's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and Opioid Crisis, which states that the Office of the National Drug Control Policy should establish a coordinated system for tracking all federally funded drug demand reduction initiatives. As the Commission noted, we are operating blindly in our efforts to combat the addiction crisis without proper scrutiny and accounting. Implementing this recommendation is key to responding to the addiction crisis in an effective and responsible manner. The bill directs ONDCP to establish such a system by using its existing coordination with federal agencies responsible for carrying out demand reduction activities, in addition to evaluating these initiatives as part of its annual drug control strategy. Additionally, and I'm almost finished here, additionally, since I understand the link between substance abuse and mental health issues, I'm also continuing to work on expanding access to mental health services. My Stand Up Act, and Maddie, I want you to listen to this, and you probably are aware, the Stand Up Act requires middle and high schools to utilize research-based best practices to identify at-risk students and link them with available resources in their community. And this is all because of the Sandy Hook Promise issue.
Yes.
The kids worked on that. I'm also working on legislation that will help curb suicide rates, which have risen by 31%, sadly, since 2001. My bill will help to standardize the screening protocols used in emergency rooms. In 2016, study found that 11% of the emergency department patients exhibited suicidal ideation. However, only 3% of these patients were diagnosed by current screening tools. We can do much better. And then also, because of Sean Crane and our local judges, we're sponsoring with a lady, a wonderful lady who's chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLaura, the Strengthening America's Families Act. And it's going to be a kids court. And we're doing it so well here in Pasco County and Pinellas County, the 6th Judicial Circuit. We got to get it around the country because it's so very vital for our families. So with that, I apologize. I guess it's a long-winded lawyer in me, but I'm excited about all these issues, solving these issues and helping out our families. So I appreciate you having me here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Is Judge Tepper on there? Judge Tepper encouraged.
Hey there, how you doing, Gus, Congressman? Great to see you. Appreciate hearing all the good stuff.
We're going to get it done, Judge. I promise you.
Well, I'm thrilled, and I know we've got the other piece going, so we'll see. I know there's other priorities right now, but we got to help our families. And Maddie, you got to go to his office. It's wonderful. They take really good care of you there. Got to go. What an opportunity. Take care. Give my best to your family.
All right. God bless you, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. And thank you, Congressman. Appreciate again the time you took today. And you have some remarkable entrepreneurial activities going on federally. So we thank you very much. Take good care. Be well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now let's move on to our next speaker, Detective Michael Sudler. Detective Sudler was hired by the Pasco Sheriff's Office in 2016. And since 2019, he has worked in as part of the Behavioral Health Intervention Team. His primary duties include working with citizens of Pasco County who have come into contact with law enforcement under circumstances that are often preceded by, as we mentioned earlier, unaddressed behavioral health concerns. These individuals are typically high utilizers of emergency services. They're subjects of welfare concerns, individuals who recently overdosed, and subjects of risk protection or threat assessment investigations. Detective Sudler works with county residents in the field, often at their homes, to identify and overcome barriers that prevent their successful engagement in behavioral health services. Detective Sudler maintains a caseload of subjects assigned to him and regularly follows up with them based on their individual needs and interest in the program. So, Detective, thanks for being here today. Welcome, sir. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It is an honor to be here, and I'm happy to see how many people are so interested and motivated to hear about what I do with the Sheriff's Office.
Outstanding, and thank you so much for your service, sir. My first question to you is just describe to us, what is the Behavioral Health Intervention Team?
The Behavioral Health Intervention Team is a Sheriff's Office initiative that began in September of 2019. It's a unit comprised of 12 detectives, an intelligence analyst, 2 supervisors, and a chain of command. And basically our function is to identify members of our community who have become high utilizers of services through the emergency response. And specifically individuals who are engaging in the emergency response in matters that are typically not a law enforcement matter, but were preceded by an unaddressed behavioral health concern.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, we respond to individuals who have a mental health condition or a substance use condition, and oftentimes co-occurring conditions at the same time. My specific role is to maintain a caseload of individuals, develop a rapport with them, continually meet with them, and gauge whether or not they're willing to reciprocate upon that rapport and encourage them to engage in services that they either have not heard of before or expressed a willingness. A lot of times these individuals don't have people in their own lives who are motivating or encouraging them or even referring them to resources in the community where they could get help. I find that I've been the most successful in simply starting that rapport by trying to be a friend to these individuals and continually reminding them that options are out there and empowering them to take advantage of them on their own.
Yeah, that's just a remarkable exemplary practice of community-oriented policing right there. And we know that when law enforcement is chiefly focused on proactive activities, that so much benefits the community. So thank you for that. Talk a little bit about specifically, in addition to the team, what are some other activities, initiatives that the Sheriff's Office is currently engaging in to combat the opioid crisis?
So I should say specifically on BHIT, we have dedicated a detective on both sides of our schedule, so 2 detectives, to responding out anytime there's been an overdose. They do a follow-up investigation. They meet with the individual who overdosed. They meet with their families. They try to ascertain what the issue is. We co-respond with a social worker who has experience in specifically in regards to substance use disorders. We got this opportunity through grants and partnerships with the Department of Health. And what we do in these instances is we go out to the house, we begin that dialogue. A day or 2 later, we have an opportunity to speak with somebody who's not concerned about getting arrested, getting charged with a crime. We get to speak with family who's not as immediately concerned as they were regarding the health or safety of the person that they just saw go to the hospital. So it's a more relaxed environment, and it gives us an opportunity to spend more time and overcome the barrier that exists during the initial emergency response, where people are typically concerned that they're going to be charged with a crime, going to be arrested. Family members are very concerned with the welfare of the individual who has experienced the overdose. So 24 to 48 hours when we get the case after patrol has initially done their investigation, then we get to come out, take more time. I bring a litany of resource information with me. I provide Narcan kits to individuals. I instruct family members how to use it. I help people understand what signs and symptoms of opioid use and abuse are and prepare them to address it if they identify that their loved one or somebody they care about or somebody they live with is experiencing an overdose, so that they can respond and be prepared for the worst case scenario. And then under best case scenario circumstances, those individuals will provide us with contact information, agree to stay in touch with me, provide their contact information to the social worker that we go out with, and engage in services as quickly as possible. Those services are available immediately. I've dealt with people who have immediately wanted to go to detox. I'll put them in the car and we'll drive there together. Without that partnership, we wouldn't be able to immediately transition someone into detox or residential treatment, or make an immediate appointment where they can get services through medication-assisted treatment or other similar services.
Detective, we've heard the term stigma being used already throughout this town hall. Talk to us a little bit about the stigma that is faced when individuals report an overdose call. We heard about the Good Samaritan, but what other elements of the stigma that do you face, and how do you mitigate that?
So the stigma's on both sides. I know that when I show up to a house, I am, to a lot of people I deal with, I am the cop, for lack of a better way to put it. That concern for a person's welfare doesn't end immediately after they see that law enforcement has arrived. So it takes time to break that down. And then it's also on the other side. People are hesitant to not only admit to their opioid use because of personal feelings towards it, but they're not willing to talk about something like that with law enforcement because it's not something that I think people prepare to discuss their commission of a crime openly with law enforcement, for even if it's for the purpose of their personal health. When I encounter those situations where stigma is such an issue, I'm so fortunate that I oftentimes am standing next to one of our partners with Baycare Behavioral Health, and I am able to stand side by side with somebody who is not connected with law enforcement, is not wearing handcuffs on their belt, is able to legitimize my role and my efforts to simply help encourage somebody's continued engagement in services. Being able to do that changes the tone and changes the feeling, not only for me as a law enforcement officer, but I can see it on the families, I can see it on the subjects we deal with. And it takes, sometimes it's quick, takes about 15 minutes. Other times I've had to spend an hour going through it all and trying to help people understand that this is not what you would characterize as a typical law enforcement interaction. This isn't, like something you've seen on TV. This isn't going to result in a mugshot. So it just depends upon the individual and their previous experience with law enforcement and on how long that typically takes.
Detective, thank you very much for being here with us today and answering those questions and giving some perspective into the outstanding work that you're doing at the Pasco Sheriff's Office and the impact that you're making in the community. Thank you for your work. Be well, be safe, sir. Thank you.
You as well.
Thank you. Let's move on to some
Dr.
Yes.
Giannette, if I can interrupt, if it's
Please.
okay, can we do a quick switch and have Nicole and Charisse speak next?
We certainly can accommodate the switch. So thank you, partner. We can move right into Nicole and Charisse. So if I may, I'll introduce Nicole. Nicole is from, these are two Baycare patients again. So they've successfully completed treatment services and again, wonderful exemplars of courage and fortitude and resilience when one is struggling, and you can see the progress that they've made. Nicole is from Madeira Beach, Florida. Nicole Harris, 37 years old. She's been in recovery for 14 months. She's been working with her treatment team for over a year, continues to learn and to grow daily. And Charisse Peters Tanksley is originally from New Jersey. She's resided in Florida for 21 years. She had her first introduction to heroin at 11 years old. She's been struggling with addiction in the form of opiates for 30 years. Today is her birthday. Happy birthday, Charisse. Thank you for celebrating and being here with us today. We appreciate your taking the time today. And she can't think of a better way, I'm going to quote, to celebrate her birthday by educating people on the opioid epidemic that we're currently facing. Charisse has been in recovery for almost a year and would like to thank her Baycare team and her church family for her support and the accomplishments that she's made. So welcome both of you. Again, congratulations on the significant progress that you're making. For you to be here today and to be able to share your testimony to folks, I think can pave the way for others who might be in similar dire circumstances. So this question is for both of you. So if you could you can take each question, both of you, when one finishes. Please, Nicole, when you finish, Charisse can take over. What's been your experience with seeking services? So we'll start with Nicole.
It's definitely been a life-changing experience for me. I've battled with opiates for the past 13 years off and on. And January of 2020, I got very sick. Honestly, I thought I had the flu. I had a fever. I was lethargic. I just had pain, undescribable pain all over my body. And when I went to the hospital, they informed me that I had a very severe blood infection called endocarditis from my IV drug use, which requires me to do 6 to 8 weeks of antibiotics. And if the infection doesn't clear up, they were going to have to do open heart surgery and actually replace the heart valve. And let's see, I'm sorry, I wrote notes. So I was in shock. My husband actually passed away from this same infection. And now I'm in the hospital dying with the same thing. And I'm in ICU, just broken and defeated. And, one day Crystal walks in she was a social worker at the hospital at the time, but she's with Baycare. And she told me about Baycare and what they have to offer. And she insisted that I meet Wendy. Got me all up in Baycare, helped me do all the paperwork and get everything ready that I needed to do to start. Once I was out of the hospital, I had to go to a nursing home for 6 weeks, the antibiotics administered, because it was through a PICC line. I had to leave that in for that amount of time. And, Crystal and Wendy both came out and visited me while I was there. I honestly don't have much. And such a support system. They even brought me clothes. And so, once I got out, I actually AMA'd from that nursing home 5 days before treatment was over, because COVID was coming out, everything was going on, and I just knew I was going to get locked down in there. And I went home and I started treatment at Baycare, and things were going well. And 2 months later to the day, that infection came back. And so I had to do another 8 weeks in the hospital. And, at that point in time, I knew I had to change everything, and that drugs were just a very small part of my problem. My problem was way bigger than drugs. It was my thinking. It was, all these other issues I have. And today life is so different. I got my driver's license back after not having it for 10 years. I'm qualifying for a program through the county where they're actually going to help me with my rent. They're going to pay 9 months of my rent, and just amazing blessings. And
Good.
That's it. Thank you.
No, that is, it's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing, that narrative. What about Charisse? What's been your experience with seeking services?
Before I came to Baycare, I was actually, suicidal. A little bit of my stories, I started when my first introduction was when I was 11 years old, and my parents were addicts. And I wasn't even supposed to come here. It was actually, I was calling for my husband, actually. And I got introduced to Crystal, who introduced me to Wendy, and I was reluctant, at first, shame, embarrassment, guilt, you know, all those feelings of thinking you're going to be judged. And, you know, I have 4 boys. They're all grown now, but I just wanted to get better because I was ready to end my life. I was ready to swallow a bottle of pills. And everything that they've named on this panel today, I have done, from heroin to me going to the doctors and getting Dilaudid and morphines and fentanyl and all of those different type of things. It's everything that they've named here, I have done. And with me seeking services and seeking help, Baycare has been nothing but supportive to me, from my caseworker, Wendy, to Dr. Fields happens to be on the panel. He's my doctor. And from him being supportive, and you're in a no judgment zone, which is what people in recovery need. And I realized the fact that I'm going to be in recovery for the rest of my life. So it's my job to encourage and to support others and to, you know, get down into the nitty gritty of what's really going on out in the streets, to be able to help people based on all the help that I received. It was given to me freely, so it's my job to give it back freely.
That is such a wonderful way of viewing when you've experienced so much pain, to be able to say, look at me now, and this is what I have to share with you now, so that you don't have to go through what I went through. I just adore the concept of the judgment-free zone that you just articulated, because again, that absolutely obliterates the issue of stigma, if we can all appreciate that and abide by it. Both of you, first, again, we'll go back to Nicole and then Cherise. A lot of folks are concerned about barriers. Talk about what barriers to treatment that you may have experienced when you were going through this journey.
In the beginning, all the barriers I experienced were self-built. I mean, I could, you know, come up with a reason or an excuse for everything. And, you know, definitely, you know, work hours did conflict with some of the groups, and, you know, sometimes not having a vehicle, but I voiced what I needed. And Wendy would be, Nicole, don't worry about it, we'll get you a lift, or here's a bus pass for the month. Or they were always accommodating and always, you know, right there to help me climb those obstacles. Once I fully surrendered to the program and to my addiction, I just started taking suggestions, and life got a lot better. So, you know, where will I see? I mentioned earlier how I went back into the hospital another 8 weeks, and, you know, I knew I could lay in that hospital bed and get all the food and watch all the movies I wanted, but I didn't do that. I sat in there and I did every group I could, every type of, you know, recovery.
I said thank you.
And, you know, I just got involved and really took the time to work on myself. And I knew nothing was more important than not using again. And, you know, anything I put before my recovery or my sobriety, I'm gonna lose it anyway. So today I climb over any barriers that might come up, and I will do whatever it takes to stay clean and sober for me. And Baycare is about 75% of what it takes for me. So thank you.
That's a wonderful story. I appreciate that. Cherise, what about you? What about any barriers that you experienced?
You know, I agree 100% with Nicole. You know, I feel like that show, that's my final answer. We are our own worst enemy. Our own worst enemy. We are our own barriers. There's nothing that stops us from doing what we have to do but us. I tend to be a little bit hard on myself, but I think, you know, the same way we were on those streets getting what we needed to get, when we want the help that we want to get, we're going to do whatever necessary to get the help that we need to get. So there's no excuse. We are our own block. I was my own block. I was my own barrier to get what I needed to get the resources from Baycare that I needed to get. But once I found out, I was in an intensive outpatient therapy. And once I saw that, I could trust people and talk to people, and like I said, it was a no judgment zone, then there were no barriers to be created, because I would do what was ever necessary for me to do to get the treatment that I needed to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And then when you find out that you just destroyed your own self-imposed barriers and you've accomplished it, what an amazing reinforcer, right? When you actually can say, look where I've been, look where I am, this I have done, with this wonderful wraparound support system that the community has given you. So I'm so delighted to hear that. That's wonderful. My last question for both of you, I'm going to weave it into one question. And the key word is advice, right? Listening and advice. So someone is in your predicament right now, where you were at one time, and they're considering seeking treatment. What would you tell them? And then what would you tell to a prescriber who is currently prescribing opioids to patients? Is there anything that if there's one thing you can just say to these prescribers, what might it be? Both from the person in your shoes and then to the prescriber. To start, Nicole?
Okay, so advice I would give, I would say to do it now. Don't wait until you're in the position I was in and in the hospital dying. You will get out of the program what you put into it. And like Sherry said, it's a judge-free zone. I've never walked in there and felt judged. I feel like Baycare has given me a family that I didn't have before. And definitely keep an open mind, build a support system and use it. Tell on yourself. Like for me, when I was thinking about using in the beginning, I would call everybody and be like, these are my thoughts. I knew that the problem lied in my head somewhere, and that my thinking in the past got me where I was in that hospital bed. So I would call and I would, when I had an idea, I would call Wendy and run it by her first, or Crystal, or my sponsor, or whoever, and just make sure that my idea was safe, because my thinking wasn't what it should be. And, I've just learned so much about myself working the 12 steps, and it's amazing. So I think everybody should work the steps, whether you're in recovery or not, just for life skills and learning about yourself. And so many people go through issues and carry things like that throughout life. And it just really showed me how to deal with all of that, things that I'd been carrying forever that had nothing to do with me, that I blamed myself for. And so what was the question about the doctor prescribing?
Right. Do you have any advice that you would give to a prescriber of opioid medications to patients?
For me, I was prescribed opioids first at 24 years old, and my MRI, I didn't know this at the time, but my MRI was actually normal. So I actually do have a lawsuit against the opioid manufacturers right now, but they overprescribed. I was 24 years old. I was getting 240 oxycodone 30s a month. I was getting, 120, 15 oxycodones, and then the Oxycontin and 90 Xanax. Like, it's the overprescribing is crazy. And honestly, I believe I did more damage on the opioids than I did, taking Tylenol or ibuprofen, because I would get that buzz and then I would overdo it. I would overwork myself, and, I would cause more pain than what was originally there. So definitely, don't over prescribe, take into consideration if somebody is an addict or has addicts in their family, because I've gone to the hospital and told them I'm an addict, I don't want any opioids, and they still, write it. It's like, I feel like you get money from the manufacturers or something for writing these certain medications. So, don't overprescribe. Like, does this person really need it? I don't think, unless you're actually dying or fighting cancer or something like that, do you really need fentanyl or something like that? Like, luckily I never experienced, the whole fentanyl came out after my my run with opiates, but I'm glad to say that I've never done that, and I'm scared to death of it,
Thank you, Nicola. That's very sage advice. What about you, Cherise? Advice from someone experiencing what you had experienced, and advice to the prescriber.
First of all, I just want to say I have to thank God first and foremost for everything. And by me having a spiritual foundation with my pastors and with Baycare, I just want everybody to be encouraged to know that it can be done, because I come from such a heavy background. My kids were taken from me twice, and I've seen so many deaths out in these streets. I've had Narcan used on me, and I've used Narcan on people. I can't tell you how many people I've had to resuscitate and use CPR on. And these are real life situations. This stuff is really going on. And I want people to know that there is help out here. You can seek services where people don't judge you, where you're not criticized or you're not condemned, because we feel as though that we're going to be mistreated or judged or misunderstood, or we're embarrassed, or whatever the case may be that will stop us from seeking services. And actually people, I'm here, at Baycare with people that are in recovery themselves, and that's strong, and that's very good, because we know that they have been there and they've done that. So I want to encourage people to know that there is help out there, there is support out there for them. And as for the medications, though, I was prescribed with my doctor. As Nicole, I was getting 300 Dilaudid, 300 Xanax, doctor shopping and, all that kind of crazy stuff. And it has slowed down, out here with the doctor shopping and everything. It still exists, but it has slowed down tremendously. And I just want the doctors to know, people don't need all that medication. There's no way in the world, when I was getting 300 Dilaudid and 300 oxycodone, that I needed all of that. Not only was I doing it, I was also selling it. I can say that now. I'm embarrassed to say that I've done it, but I've done it because I want people, and I'm saying that because I want people to know that this stuff really exists and this stuff really is real. And we don't need all of that medication. Nobody needs all of that medication. Nobody's in that much pain because you're basically overdosing slowly. So I just want doctors to know we don't need all that medication. And I want people to know, to be encouraged, that it is possible for recovery. I have a job now. I'm working in a hospital. I'm about to start clinical soon. Then I'm going to be going to school for human and social services. So it is possible to live a good life with recovery. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. I know that I can speak for participants of this town hall to say how proud I am of you, your courage, your testimony, the level of fortitude again and resilience that you've all both just demonstrated. And I wish you nothing but the best in your successful recovery, and continue to be, again, models for other individuals who are suffering as you did. So thank you both. And again, Nicole Harris and Cherise Peters-Tanksley. Cherise, happy birthday. Again, thanks for joining us and being here today. All the best to both of you. Shall we move on now to the practitioner component of the session? Let's go to, we have two practitioners and who I'm sure solidify what you just heard. We'll start with Dr. Jason Fields. He's been practicing addiction medicine for 10 years. He was a general pediatrician in North Carolina and started a second career in addictions in Florida in 2011. He did a fellowship in addiction medicine from 11 to 2013 while working at DACO, a community treatment center in East Hillsborough County. He's been board certified in addiction medicine since 2012, and he went on to become the medical director at DACO and has experience working in both outpatient and residential substance use treatment centers. In 2019, he joined the Baycare behavioral health team to bring high-quality addiction medicine to the organization. He enjoys community outreach, as he's doing today, education in the community, and a focus on best practice medication-assisted treatment for opioid use disorder. He's a peer mentor for both the FADAA and DCF, and he has served as the president of the Florida Society for Addiction Medicine, and he's also treasurer on the board. We also have John Essenberg, who's the vice president of medication-assisted and HIV services at Operation PAR. He graduated from Princeton University in 2009 with a degree in psychology. He's a certified addiction professional. He started working at PAR in 2010 as a substance abuse counselor at the Medication Assisted Patient Services Clinic in Bradenton. And for the last 7 years, he supervised all of PAR's MAPS programs with treatment centers located in Spring Hill, Port Richey, Clearwater, Largo, St. Pete, Bradenton, Sarasota, Port Charlotte, North Fort Myers, and Fort Myers. The MAPS programs are collectively operated by approximately 240 staff, consisting of business, clinical, medical, and they're currently providing medication-assisted treatment to over 4,400 active patients who are diagnosed with opioid use disorders. John, thank you. Doctor, thank you. Appreciate both of your being here today. I have questions for both of you, and we'll do it similar to the way we did with our patients. I'll start with our good doctor, and then we'll go to John. How can we connect someone to the services that you provide, sir?
So we just try to be visible in the community through efforts like these. I'd like to say thank you so much for having me on the panel today. I've been part of Baycare Behavioral Health since 2019, and I'm part of a team. We have a lot of folks making this happen. Warm handoffs from overdoses in the community, like was just mentioned, and getting on effective medication-assisted treatment. What I try to do is just let people know that services are available in the community. I do a lot of outreach like this, and will continue to do so. We have partnered recently with BHIT, and we have, as mentioned, successfully received a lot of recent overdoses and got them onto effective treatment. So partnering with Pasco County Sheriff's Office and the BHIT team is another way that we try to engage the community. Baycare Behavioral Health, I think, sets up best practice substance use treatment, and it's comprehensive. We offer, we treat dual diagnoses. We treat mental health as well as substance use. And we don't just do medications. We offer all levels of care, from residential to intensive outpatient to outpatient. And we have case management too, nurses, medical assistants, and therapists who specialize in trauma and therapy to substance use therapy treatment, to just give a good comprehensive approach to the patient, give them their best chances for successes like we just heard with Nicole and Charisse. Yeah, we're trying to just be visible in the community through efforts like these, and working with hospital systems too. I've worked with both inpatients and ER physicians in trying to facilitate warm handoffs to substance use treatment for people that are admitted with a complication of substance use or that presented ER in withdrawal or with an overdose.
Thank you, Dr. Fields. Appreciate that. And then segueing with a warm handoff, let's go to Jonathan Essenberg. What about your services? How do we connect people to your services, John?
So our Operation PARS MAPS program, Medication Assisted Patient Services, located in Port Richey, 7720 Washington Street in Port Richey. So we don't require any sort of referral. If you have of anyone who is struggling with opioid use disorder, they just have to show up Monday through Friday in the morning. The earlier they arrive, the more likely they'll be admitted that same day, assuming that they are eligible. To get a hold of us, if you would prefer to call ahead of time, we have a 24-hour hotline number, and it's 888-PAR-NEXT. I'll type it in the chat, but here.
888-PAR-NEXT.
Yes, and we accept Medicaid, Medicare, and most private third-party insurances and private pay. So the caveat with the third-party insurance is that most insurance plans don't really cover medication-assisted treatment in the way that it's provided at an opioid treatment program, which is primarily, administering methadone treatment and buprenorphine treatment to patients on a daily basis. Insurance plans end up interpreting that as though it's individual visits every single day, where somebody would be required to pay a copay. And that copay ends up being much more than what we would charge somebody without any insurance. We also have a number of grants that we're often able to take part in. Currently, the State Opioid Response Grant, we've been given a lot of funding to be able to cover uninsured and underinsured individuals, so long as they are under 150% of the federal poverty guideline. And that will end up reducing the costs as necessary in order for them to continue their treatment. But again, if you need more information, or if you're curious about coming to Operation PAR for methadone or buprenorphine or Vivitrol treatment, all you have to really do is just show up. If you want to call, it's the 888-PAR-NEXT.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Let's stay on the theme of stigma that has been surfaced earlier. And Dr. Fields, what are some of the stigma-related issues that oftentimes people contend with medication-assisted treatment?
Well, so, addiction is a disease, as Jonathan and I are well aware. And knowing that and being educated on addiction as a disease, and being able to educate other medical providers in the community about that is, a big part of the practice of addiction medicine. So whereas if you're not aware of that, that it's a disease process just like diabetes, hypertension, et cetera, you're apt to say, why can't they just stop on their own? Why would they continue to get incarcerated and come out and use immediately after being incarcerated for a few years? Why would they give up their custody of their children? Why would they, disengage from a job and be on the streets and homeless? All of that are symptoms of the disease of addiction, where you lose the choice. It's not a choice anymore. And so approaching across the board, and when these clients either go to a hospital or go to the ER or come for services at one of our centers, they need to be met with compassion and be educated on that. And we have effective medications. This is a disease, and as Jonathan was mentioning, we offer methadone and opiate treatment programs, and we offer buprenorphine and buprenorphine products, as well as Vivitrol, an antagonist, a blocker. We can give all of that because it is a disease, and we can target this in combination with an appropriate level of treatment and therapy. And also, I added on our numbers for our information to everyone, also about how you can engage treatment at daycare.
Excellent, thank you. Jonathan, what about from your perspective in stigma?
So in my experience, the stigma related to MAT treatment is predominantly refers to methadone, but also to a lesser degree, buprenorphine, the Suboxone and Subutex. I've not really encountered any instances of stigma or negative bias regarding Vivitrol, which it's not particularly surprising given the nature of the drug. But the most common examples I've encountered for the stigma tend to revolve around this false notion that the effects of methadone and buprenorphine are essentially no different than any other commonly abused opioid substance. And closely related to that, it seems as though most people don't recognize the difference between physiological dependency and addiction, where they tend to operate hand in hand, but they are separate parts of the brain. As is often the case with really any stigma related to behavioral health disorders and treatment, it is fundamentally the result of both general scientific ignorance and also, I feel like, the willingness to accept unverifiable or unqualified anecdotal reports as though it's sufficient evidence to form an opinion. But it is important to point out that the overwhelming majority of individuals who are actively engaged in medication-assisted treatment are able to be successful. They're able to abstain from illicit opioid use, and they're able to function normally. So, if you have someone who is, receiving an appropriate dosage of methadone or buprenorphine, they're not abusing other illicit substances, that person would be virtually indistinguishable from any other person not in treatment. And unfortunately, when somebody tends to find out if, that so-and-so is on methadone or buprenorphine, it's usually not a positive experience that prompted that information. There will be situations where somebody who may have just started methadone treatment, but they're also abusing other substances like a benzodiazepine, and somebody sees that they're impaired, and they start asking questions, and they come across the information like, oh, well, this person says that they're in methadone treatment, and then they lock that in their brain, and that association is that, well, methadone treatment means that somebody's going to actually be impaired. And it's really frustrating, and I'm so glad that more and more people who are in recovery are being more forthcoming about it. But it is very difficult for somebody who's successful in medication-assisted treatment to feel motivated to disclose that to people, because again, the stigma exists, and it offers them very little benefit to volunteer that information. So people tend not to hear so much about the successes, but they tend to come across the really negative situations, and then they form that association.
Yes, that's a very good point. Dr. Fields, and I'll ask the same thing to Jonathan as well, any guidelines that you might have or suggest for individuals who recently began their trajectory on opioid prescriptions?
Yeah, so there are now guidelines for prescribers, and a big part of addiction medicine is to educate your specialist and is to educate other providers in the community about safe prescribing guidelines. Anyone that is prescribed an opioid should have an assessment. And if it's acute, there are state laws. You can now prescribe only for 3 or 7 days. And if you want to get a refill, you have to have a physician evaluation. It's now law. So we are helping reduce these just ever ongoing, what are intended to be short prescriptions stints for opioids into just longer, with the patient calling back and getting refills. So there are some state laws that have been put into effect. In terms of policies for ongoing opioid therapy, so-called chronic therapy for chronic pain issues, the most common ones that we would encounter for chronic back pain, joint pain, fibromyalgia. Many of the patients that we see with an overdose, or that we see just whose lives have been turned upside down by opioids using heroin and fentanyl, started on oxycodone years ago. And it's a story that I know that both of the providers on here hear time and time again about how it started. And their first exposure to opioids was for their primary care doctor referred them to a pain clinic, which, as we covered a little bit earlier, without the PDMP in place, prescription drug monitoring program, and without guidelines, this exorbitant amount of unregulated oxycodone and other prescription opiates went into the community, the so-called first wave of the opioid epidemic. Once we got that under control, it was heroin. And now that we have made strides and try to get on top of that, now it's fentanyl and the heroin, or just fentanyl alone, analogs that are so dangerous in all the drugs, not just opioids. So knowing that, and knowing what we hear time and time again, in 2016, the CDC gave the opioid prescribing guidelines, which any physician with a DEA should be familiarized with. Whether you're a family practitioner, if you utilize your DEA, internal medicine, whether you're a specialist, you should know those guidelines. And there are newer guidelines, a little bit stricter, from the Veterans Affairs also, that came out about a year later. So there are good resources that can be found on asam.org, and the CDC website as well, for opioid prescribing guidelines. And part of that is screening for, do you have a history of a substance use disorder? A question which should always be asked. Right. So a lot of times before patients realize that they've got a problem, they try to stop their opioid, and God, they're having withdrawal symptoms. It does not take long. So having a clear plan with your medical provider is paramount about how long you'll be on these, transitioning to non-steroidal anti-inflammatories and non-opioid pain relievers. If you have a history of addiction, doing your best to avoid getting the prescription opioids in the first place, or being transparent and, having someone else hold the medications. Anyway, setting up a plan. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that feedback, that guidance. John, anything else you'd like to add regarding that guidance?
Sure. So I think it's important that people keep in mind the susceptibility for opioid addiction. A huge component of it is genetic. And I think that, there's a big misconception out there that somebody either has an addictive personality or they don't. I often hear, the phrase addictive personality. Being susceptible to addiction can be substance specific. So even if someone's able to, confidently be able to recreationally use alcohol without having a problem with it, or even any other kind of harder drugs maybe that they've tried, but they haven't tried opiates yet, it would be a mistake to automatically assume that they could handle opiates just because they could handle some other drug. It is a very insidious drug where the dependency, and particularly the emotional dependency on the drug, can sneak up on you. But like Dr. Fields said, fortunately, the new pain management prescription guidelines have come out to dramatically reduce the amount of prescriptions that have come out, which certainly helps. But I would just say, if you are nervous about potentially, becoming addicted to opiates, maybe ask your doctor for a non-opioid pain medication rather than switching to that. Because in a lot of cases, honestly, it's perfectly okay to be a little bit uncomfortable when you're recovering from something. You don't need to be completely pain-free.
Thank you very much, John and Dr. Fields. So we have Dr. Jason Fields and John Essenberg. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you both, gentlemen, for the work that you've done in our community and the impact you've had on your patients with whom you've worked. Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you, guys. Honored to be on the panel. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Parnia, we're done with our panelist component, and I know we're at the tail end of the program. So, did you have any questions in the chat that you'd like to share with the group before we close?
I do not see any questions, but I do. Yeah, I do not see any questions, but I do want to thank the panelists. I know some of you stayed a little over. I do appreciate your participation. It truly does mean a lot to get this information out into the community. If you have any questions, feel free to either unmute or drop them in the chat box. We will wait a couple seconds. If not,
I wanted to share that I posted a copy of an addiction article that Dr. Vincent Folletti, the co-investigator of the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, wrote in 2003. And if we don't pair trauma assessments when somebody walks in the door with substance abuse or mental health problems, we're missing the boat. And I urge you all to check out the CDC they have wonderful information. The Robert Woods Johnson Foundation has wonderful information. This article from Dr. Folletti is very helpful. And if you don't heal what you're trying to silence, we're not going to get very far. And the medications may be of assistance, but the long-term healing may come from understanding that the things that happen to you should never have happened to you, and it's not your fault, and to help you build resilience. So just my 15 cents.
Thank you very much for that. Very eloquently stated, Judge. The clear implications of underlying therapy and counseling and working with all the psychodynamic, the psychosocial issues that just converge on that individual who has unfortunately, unwillingly resorted to opioids to mitigate that pain. So it's critically important why we need that wraparound level of intervention. So thank you. Well, this brings us to the conclusion of this very meaningful event, my friends. I'd like to thank all the panelists, the practitioners, law enforcement, all of our professionals, Congressman Larakis working on the front lines of these opioid crisis, making every effort to make the necessary changes so those who are suffering can find meaning, can find hope, and the ability to develop fulfilling choices again and meet the dreams that we all espouse. Additionally, many thanks to our patients for joining us today. They truly completed this program. Thank you to the patients for their courage and for sharing that level of fortitude and that level of resilience and the victory, the phoenix rising from this intense pain that they had experienced. It has been a saga, and again, others who may be in their shoes proverbially can certainly look up to those stories. They too are exemplars of hope for a better today and a tomorrow. You've heard many themes today, my friends: hope, services, obliteration of stigma, judgment-free zone, opportunity for change, looking at the whole person, caring, and you are not alone. The level of social support is unquestionably there for those who are struggling. Community advocacy was another theme that we heard. If you or a loved one is struggling, I encourage you strongly to reach out as soon as possible so that, again, you can be part of the efforts to support, to heal, to restore them again, and we can begin those. We have a community of social support that's ready to assist, and the key phrase is, one is not alone. You are not alone as you're going through this saga. This concludes our informational discussion, our town hall today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. I wish everyone a very good, blessed evening and a remainder of the week. Be well and be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Fun.
Waiting on Parnia to end the meeting.
I'm just waiting for everyone to leave.
Okay.
I was just going to ask if you guys wanted to debrief